This is HFY Vanguard. We don't just explore the stars, we leave our mark. And our mark starts now. The plasma cutter screamed against the warped metal, showering molten sparks across the cramped docking bay. Ben Grayson kept his eyes narrowed against the glare, one hand steady on the tool, the other bracing the panel that absolutely didn't want to stay in place. The whole ship shuddered again, a hollow groan reverberating through its failing frame. Somewhere beyond the docking clamps, Junk City roared with battle pirate weapons cutting across a skyline made of derelict freighters and welded container towers. It was a typical day in the armpit of the galaxy. For Ben Grayson, that meant business. "Port stabilizers shot to hell," he muttered to no one in particular. His voice was hoarse, worn from too many years breathing recycled air and engine exhaust. Sweat dripped into the scruff of his beard as AC/DC's Thunderstruck blared from the speaker, clipped to his belt. He worked better with noise. Silence meant thinking, and thinking led to remembering. He wasn't interested in that. A laser blast hammered the bay doors 20 feet behind him, leaving a molten crater that hissed as the metal cooled. Ben didn't flinch. The pirates would keep hammering until they got bored, or until this ship went dark and dead. The smart move would have been to leave these idiots to their fate, but the Marin family had found him shoved a bag of worthless credits into his hand and begged. Mechanics code: once you take the job, you see it through. Even if the pay was garbage, even if the client was an arrogant bastard in a too-tight uniform. Status, the voice crackled through the failing intercom. Male stiff, every syllable sharp, with that military academy diction that tried to hide the raw panic underneath. Ben yanked the fried coupling free and let it clatter to the oil-streaked deck. "Depends. You want it pretty or you want it functional? I want to not die." "Then shut up and let me work." He grabbed a replacement part from his kit. Wrong size, wrong alloy, but he'd make it fit. He always did. That was the job. Not making things perfect, making them work ugly and stubborn like him. The bay shook again, dust sifting down from the overhead struts. The pirates outside weren't giving up. From the rhythm of the fire, he pegged them as crimson teeth, the kind that liked to cripple engines before boarding. They always wanted their prey alive enough to scream. Ben adjusted the plasma torch, coaxing the mismatched part into place when new footsteps clanged down the cargo ramp. He glanced up, frowning. The first thing he saw was hair bright, unnatural electric pink. Then the woman herself stepped into the harsh light. Purple skin, smooth and gleaming like a starship hull under starlight. Muscles flexed beneath a tank top that had survived more campaigns than it should have, the fabric clinging to her lithe frame. Cargo pants, practical boots, no jewelry, no nonsense. Her eyes silver as molten mercury locked on him with the intensity of a targeting laser. She moved with that deceptive grace of someone who'd once been trained to kill and never quite forgot. "You the mechanic?" she asked. "No, I'm the entertainment." Ben turned back to his work, sparks flying. "Your husband hired me. Speaking of which, where's Captain Tight-Ass?" Her laugh came out sharp, bitter. "On the bridge, pretending he's not about to piss himself." Ben smirked despite himself. She smelled faintly of something floral overlaid with engine oil. It fit. "How bad is it?" she asked, crouching beside him without hesitation, silver eyes scanning the exposed components. "On a scale of 1 to 10, about a 15. This boat should have been scrapped 5 years ago." "It was," she said. "My husband dragged it out of a salvage yard. Said he'd restore it to military glory." Ben arched an eyebrow. "How's that working out for him?" The ship lurched violently, something expensive tearing loose in the upper decks. The woman didn't even blink. "About as well as everything else he touches." She extended a hand. "Thalia Marine, since my husband forgot to introduce us." Ben Grayson. He finished the well with a hiss, sparks dancing around their knees. "And standard procedures are for people with time and proper parts. I've got neither." Before she could reply, another voice rang out high and excited. "Mom, you've got to see his tools." A younger figure bounded down the ramp. Same pink hair, same purple skin, but younger, barely 20, maybe 19. Energy radiated off her in waves. She was already smeared with grease across her cheek from poking through his kit. "Elrathalia," snapped, I told you to stay put. But Mom, look, he's got a genuine Xerxes Core multispanner. Discontinued model Elra held up the tool like it was a relic of the gods. Ben snatched it from her hands. Kid, careful. Plasma setting's got a hair trigger. I know. Her grin widened. Set it off twice in Dad's workshop. He was pissed. Despite himself, Ben chuckled. The kid was trouble. Betty was. Now get back before you lose a finger. Elra pouted, but her eyes still sparkled with mischief. Can you show me how you're bypassing the coupling safeguards I've read about it? But, Elra! Thalia's tone dropped into command sharp as a blade. Not now. The ship lurched again. Ben slammed the panel back into place. Tell your husband he's got 5 minutes of thrust tops. After that, you're all space dust. At that exact moment, Harden Marin appeared at the top of the ramp. Every inch of him screamed regulation, military polished boots, perfect posture, a jaw clenched hard enough to crack bone. But his eyes betrayed him, sweat already gleamed at his temples. You said you could fix it. I said I'd try, Ben replied, shouldering his kit. 5 minutes is a miracle with this junk heap. I'm paying you to... No, Ben cut him off. You're not. Because you don't have credits, do you, Captain? Silence. Harden's lips pressed together, the truth laid bare in the absence of denial. Ben turned to leave. Good luck with the pirates. Wait, Thalia said quickly, stepping into his path. Her mercury eyes held no fear, only determination. We can pay. With what Ben gestured to the failing ship around them. This scrap metal coffin. Thalia didn't flinch. She turned to her husband. Harden, make the offer. The man hesitated, pride and shame warring across his face. Thalia, I don't think. Make the offer or we all die here, she snapped. Harden's jaw worked. Finally, he straightened like a man walking to his own execution. In accordance with frontier law, I offer my wife and daughter as payment for services rendered. The plasma cutter slipped from Ben's hand, clanging against the deck. Excuse me, you heard him, Thalia said. She stepped closer, silver eyes gleaming not with fear, but anticipation. Debt bondage. It's legal in the outer sectors. Elra bounced on her heels. Does this mean? It means we live, Thalia cut in. Her gaze never left Ben's. Ben stared between them, the arrogant captain, the fierce wife, the eager daughter. The whole galaxy burned outside pirates closing in, and here he was standing in the middle of the strangest deal of his career. 5 minutes of thrust, 5 minutes to decide if he'd take the bargain of his life or walk away. For a long moment, Ben just stood there, staring at the family like they had all gone insane. Pirates were pounding the station, the ship's stabilizers were seconds away from tearing free, and instead of panicking like normal people, they were calmly discussing selling themselves off like it was the going rate for survival. He almost wanted to laugh. Almost. This is crazy, he said, finally. His voice came out flat, but his mind was racing. You don't trade people. You don't... Hell, what the kind of husband even suggests that? Harden Marin bristled, the last embers of pride glowing beneath his polished facade. It is law, frontier law. My word is binding. Binding, Ben repeated, disgust curling his lip. Yeah, well, you can bind yourself to the nearest airlock, for all I care. I'm not in the business of... You took the job. Thalia's voice cut through him like a plasma torch. She had stepped closer, so close, he could see the faint shimmer of scales tracing her collarbone under the flickering lights. Her silver eyes didn't blink. You swore by the mechanic's code. Payment accepted means service complete. Or do you break your own rules when it's inconvenient? Ben's jaw tightened. Damn her for knowing how to play him. The mechanic's code wasn't written in any law book, but in the outer sectors, it meant more than a dozen governments put together. Take a job, finish a job. Take payment, honor payment. Without it, every mechanic was just another liar in a universe built on scams. Still, it was one thing to get paid in chickens or scrap parts or homebrew fuel. Another thing entirely to be handed two breathing, sarcastic, sharp-eyed women. This is insane, he repeated, but softer now, like he was trying to convince himself. Maybe. Thalia's smile was thin-edged with something dark. But it's survival, and survival doesn't care about what makes you comfortable. Before he could answer, the ship shuddered violently. The crimson teeth had gotten tired of waiting. The whole docking bay rattled as plasma blasts carved away another section of hull. Alarm klaxons howled, drowning out the sound of Elro's excited voice. "They're boarding, Mom! They're boarding!" Ben looked at the kid, expecting fear. Instead, she looked like someone had just announced a festival. Her silver eyes gleamed as she bounced on her toes, still gripping the multi-spanner she'd stolen from his kit. "What the hell is wrong with you people?" Ben demanded. "Do you not understand that pirates are about to cut this ship into chunks? Which is why you need to decide." Thalia grabbed his arm, her grip strong enough to make him blink. "Deal or no deal, Grayson. Because in 30 seconds, this isn't about payment. It's about who's still breathing." His instincts screamed at him to walk away, to sprint back to his shuttle and leave these lunatics behind. 5 minutes of thrust was enough for him alone. He didn't need their broken captain or his unsettlingly calm wife or the teenage prodigy who thought plasma tools were toys. But his gaze lingered on Elra, the way her grin faltered for the first time as the ship rocked under another blast. She looked at him like he was supposed to fix everything. Like he wasn't just a grease monkey with scars and a loud playlist, but something more. "Damn it." "Fine." He grabbed Thalia's wrist with one hand and Elra's with the other, yanking them toward the access ladder. "Deal. Now move." They sprinted for the engine's room as the docking bay doors finally gave way. Crimson Teeth Raiders poured through their red-painted armor, gleaming under the emergency lights. Laser fire carved the deck behind them, sparks chasing their heels. Hardin led the charge, his polished boots slipping on the trembling deck. For once, all his parade ground training counted for nothing. Panic stripped him bare. "Engine room," Ben barked, shoving the two women up the ramp ahead of him. "I need to nurse that patch job or we're flying apart in the first jump." "What about the pirates?" Hardin's voice cracked, all authority gone. "You've got guns, don't you?" Ben snarled. "Then use them." They barreled into the engine room, and for a moment even Ben forgot the incoming fire. The place looked like a graveyard of bad decisions. Half the conduits were held together with tape power couplings, jury-rigged with civilian-grade clamps. Entire panels stripped bare for parts. "This is what you gave me to work with!" Ben shouted, fury flaring hotter than the plasma torch in his hand. "This isn't an engine room, it's a goddamn scrapyard." Thalia didn't flinch. She moved straight to the secondary console, her fingers moving with confidence that made Ben's eyebrows shoot up. She wasn't just decoration, she knew her way around a ship. "Port stabilizers fluctuating," she reported. "I see it." Ben shoved aside a fried bundle of wires and began rerouting power manually. "You weren't kidding when you said you knew ships." "Misspent youth," she said, almost smiling. "Before I became a trophy. Mom used to be a racer." Elra chimed in, crouching beside him like an eager apprentice. She could outfly anyone before Dad. "Elra," Thalia's tone was sharp. "What he should know who he's dealing with, since he owns us now." Ben's temper snapped. "Nobody owns anybody. Not me, not your father, not the damn pirates outside. Got it." Elra blinked, startled. Thalia's eyes narrowed, but not in anger. Something softer flickered there, quickly hidden. The ship lurched again. The weld Ben had slapped onto the coupling screamed as stress ripped across it. "Like hell you're failing on me now," he growled, bracing the panel with an entire body. "Kid Red Spanner. Now." Elra moved without hesitation, shoving the tool into his hand. Sparks flew as he reinforced the joint, sweat stinging his eyes. The console alarms flared, stabilizers spiking into the red. Thalia didn't wait for orders. She cut power to the port array, rerouting through a secondary feed. "That'll buy us 30 seconds, she said. "It'll have to." The hyperdrive spooled a tortured whine like dying cats in a blender. Ben gritted his teeth, palm pressed flat against the trembling hull. The vibrations felt like a living thing trying to tear itself apart. "Come on, baby," he whispered. "One more time, just one more time." Space twisted, the stars bent, the universe folded, and the ship screamed through the void. And then silence. Ben slumped against the bulkhead, lungs burning. They'd made it. No pirates, no immediate explosions. Just the faint hum of a ship barely holding itself together. Elra let out a hysterical laugh. "We actually made it." "For now," Ben muttered. He wiped blood from his mouth. He must have bitten his tongue during the jump. "But this heap isn't going anywhere without a full overhaul." Thalia moved closer, offering a hand to haul him up. From this angle, with the emergency lights painting her skin burgundy, she looked like something out of a fever dream. "A deal's a deal," she said quietly. Congratulations, Mr. Grayson. You're now the proud owner of 2 Marin women. 3 Harden's voice crackled bitterly from the intercom. The deal was for 3. For just a second, Thalia's hand tightened on Ben's. And for the first time since the whole insane bargain began, Ben saw something flicker in her mercury eyes. Not resignation, not bitterness. Something dangerously close to hope. This, Ben muttered, finally taking her hand is the dumbest payment I've ever accepted. But his gut told him it wouldn't be the last. Junk City was never quiet. Even in the aftermath of the pirate assault, even with docking bays half melted and smoke still curling through its labyrinthine alleys, the place thrummed like a diseased heart that refused to stop beating. Ships limped in half alive and sparking. Scavenger crews scrambled over them like ants. Traders shouted deals in a dozen languages, while mercenaries kept hands on their weapons. Survival wasn't a pastime here, it was the air they breathed. Ben Grayson hated it. He guided the marine wreck, if you could call it a ship, onto a battered pier, the docking clamps locking with a teeth-grinding screech. The whole vessel shuddered as if sighing in relief. He wanted nothing more than to crawl into his own workshop, throw on some music, and forget the universe for a few hours. But the problem with survival was that it always came with strings. And Junk City had one string thicker than all the rest, Gregor Dallas. They called him the Baron of Gear's ruler of this trash heap turned empire. Some said he'd been a scavenger once, crawling through derelict warships until he stitched enough machines into his own body to become half man, half factory. Others claimed he'd been a warlord in some forgotten campaign, carving out this cesspit when no one else cared. Whatever the truth, Junk City bowed to him or got crushed under his augmented heel. Ben had no interest in bowing. Unfortunately, Gregor had a habit of noticing anyone who made noise in his domain. And surviving a pirate assault with 2 alien women as payment, that was the kind of noise you couldn't muffle. The call came sooner than expected. The comm crackled to life as Ben checked over the engine one last time. The voice that slithered through the speakers was smooth as oil poured over broken glass. Ben Grayson, I hear you've been busy. Ben closed his eyes, swore under his breath. Dallas. Gregor, please. Titles are for politicians. I'm just a humble businessman. Businessmen don't blow up half their competition to collect docking fees. A chuckle low and metallic like gears grinding together. Efficiency is its own reward. Now about your acquisitions. Thalia appeared in the doorway of the engine room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Elra peeked from behind her curiosity, bright in her silver eyes. Not acquisitions, Ben said firmly. Payment, and none of your concern. Oh, but everything in Junk City is my concern, especially when it involves property owed to me. Ben frowned. Property? You think Harden Marin arrived here on his own merit? Gregor's tone was mocking. 8 years ago, I spared that family from pirates. A contract was signed, his military connections in exchange for their safety. A contract he failed to honor, which means the debt falls to me, and you mechanic just walked off with my collateral. Ben's stomach tightened. He'd been played, though not by Thalia. Harden had dragged them here on borrowed time, his debts festering like an untreated wound. Then talk to him, Ben snapped. I'm no debt collector. Oh, I have, Gregor purred. Your Captain Marin is sitting across from me right now. Begging, actually. Quite pitiful. He insists his wife and daughter belong to him, not you. I find the situation entertaining. Thalia's lip curled. Of course he does. Elra muttered, coward. Ben clenched his fists. He could almost see Harden's smug face across from Gregor, spitting polished words while sweat dripped beneath his collar. So what? You want me to hand them back? Oh no, that would be boring. Instead, let's do this properly. A master's duel. Frontier law, just like the captain invoked. The words hung heavy in the air. Ben knew the stories everyone did. Master's duels weren't fought with guns or fists. They were fought with skill. 2 mechanics, 1 pile of scrap. First to build a functioning ship that reached stable orbit, won everything. Loser lost it all, sometimes even their lives. You can't be serious, Ben said. When am I not serious? Gregor's amusement dripped through the comm. Your reputation intrigues me, Grayson. The best mechanic in 3 sectors. Accepts any job, any payment. They say you once rebuilt a hyperdrive out of kitchen appliances. I want to see if the stories are true. Or you just want to make me dance for the crowd. Exactly. Grigor laughed sharp and cruel. 3 days from now in the public square, the city will watch. The stakes, the Marin women, your workshop, and your life's reputation. Unless, of course, you're afraid. The line went dead before Ben could answer. Silence filled the engine room. The hum of the dying reactor seemed louder than ever. You can't do it, Thalia said at last, her voice flat. Not on his terms. He'll cheat. Ben ran a hand over his face, smearing grease across his skin. He always cheats. But I don't have a choice, do I? He's got your husband in his pocket and half the city under his thumb. If I walk away, he'll just send Wrenchmen after me. And after you. Elra's eyes shone with excitement. So we build a ship. This isn't a game, kid, Ben growled. It's not a game to me, she shot back. It's a chance. To prove we're worth more than property. To prove we're a team. Thalia studied him, her expression softening for just a heartbeat. She's right. You're already in this whether you like it or not. At least this way, you fight on ground you know. Ben wanted to argue. Wanted to shout that he was just a mechanic, not a champion, not a leader. But the words stuck in his throat. Because deep down, he knew the truth he had been fixing, broken things his whole life. Engines, couplings, hulls. Maybe now it was time to fix something bigger. Fine. He exhaled hard, feeling the weight settle on his shoulders. We'll do it, but on my terms. We build ugly, we build fast, and we don't play fair. If Dallas wants a show, we'll give him one he won't forget. Elra grinned, practically vibrating with energy. Yeah. Thalia's gaze lingered on him, silver eyes unreadable. Then it begins. The next 3 days blurred into chaos. Junk City prepared for the duel like it was a festival. Crowds swarmed the square betting on outcomes, trading rumors about the mechanic who took a wife and daughter as payment. Scrap heaps were hauled in from every corner of the city, rusted hull plates, scorched engines, outdated processors. Gregor made his entrance with theatrical precision, his augmented arm gleaming with fresh plating, his wrenchmen forming a wall of muscle around him. His pile of scrap was already half sorted, laid out like a surgeon's instruments. Precision, speed, efficiency, that was his weapon. Ben's weapon was different, chaos. He stood before his own mountain of junk, Thalia and Elra at his side. Tools strapped to his belt, grease staining his hands, music thundering from the ever-present speaker. He didn't look like a champion. He looked like a man about to wrestle miracles out of garbage. The crowd roared as the announcer's voice boomed over the square. By decree of frontier law and the will of the Baron of Gears, the master's duel begins. Ben cracked his knuckles, glanced at Thalia, and allowed himself the smallest grin. Let's fix something. The square reeked of ozone sweat and oil. Floodlights blazed overhead, throwing harsh white light across 2 mountains of scrap that had been hauled into place by Junk City's scavenger guilds. On one side stood Gregor Dallas, Baron of Gears, surrounded by his wrenchmen. His augmented arm gleamed like a weaponized forge tool spinning with mechanical precision. His pile of scrap had already been neatly categorized hull plates, stacked processors sorted by generation engines, stripped and polished. Efficiency in steel and muscle. On the other side, Ben Grayson stared at his own pile. It looked like a landfill. Rusted girders jutted at odd angles, entire sections of half-destroyed ships stuck together with corrosion processors dumped in a heap like children's toys. A twisted grav cannon stuck out of the pile at a ridiculous angle, dripping coolant onto the cracked pavement. The crowd packed tight around the square, their voices a constant roar. Bets flew through the air, credits changing hands faster than plasma bolts. 2-1 on the Baron Grayson won't last an hour. I'll put 50 on the purple girl. She's got racer's hands, I can see it. Ben spat on the ground, adjusted the strap of his tool belt, and cranked his music up another notch. The opening riff of Highway to Hell blasted from the tiny speaker on his hip. If the whole city was going to watch, he might as well set the soundtrack. All right, he muttered, clapping his grease-stained hands together. Let's make a miracle. Thalia crouched beside the scrap pile, her tank top streaked with grime, silver eyes scanning the mess with sharp calculation. She moved like she was back in a racer's pit crew, instinctively assessing angles, stress points, and possibilities. Her hands traced along a cracked hull plate, testing its strength. Diagonal welding pattern, she said. If we reinforce the seams, it'll hold against atmospheric stress. Ben arched a brow. Since when do you know structural engineering? Since I spent 3 years patching illegal racers with whatever junk we could steal. Don't act surprised, Grayson. You're not the only one who can make miracles from garbage. Elra bounded up with their arms full of scavenged components. Look what I found. She dumped them at Ben's feet, 3 outdated nav chips, a fusion initiator with scorch marks, and what looked suspiciously like a pre-war power cell. Ben crouched, turning the parts over in his hands. His lips twitched. These are fried. Mostly fried. Elra corrected her grin wide. But the nav chips still have some processing capacity, and the fusion initiator has about 40% charge. We can rig it with a bypass. Please tell me we can rig it with a bypass. Ben looked at the eager face staring back at him, grease on her cheek, silver eyes wide with excitement. He sighed. Yeah, kid, we can rig it. Elra whooped, bouncing on her heels before grabbing a spanner from his kit. What do I do? Control, harness. Keep it simple, no fancy tricks. We don't need elegant, we need functional. Think you can handle it? She saluted dramatically, pink hair bouncing. Yes, sir. Thalia's mouth curved in a small smile as she watched her daughter dive into the parts pile. For a fleeting moment, she looked almost at peace. Then her gaze shifted back to Ben, serious once more. He's going to cheat. Ben followed her eyes across the square. Gregor was already welding hull plates together, his augmented arm moving with impossible speed. Sparks flew in perfect arcs, his wrenchmen feeding him components like priests attending a god. His ship was taking shape fast, sleek, menacing, brutal. Of course he's going to cheat, Ben said, pulling on his goggles. That's why we don't play his game. We play mine. The first hours were a blur of sparks, curses, and pounding music. Ben lost himself in the rhythm of creation, coaxing order out of chaos with bare hands and stubborn will. His welds weren't pretty, but they were strong. Every plate added to the frame was a little victory. Every jury-rigged circuit that hummed instead of exploded was another middle finger to the Baron across the square. Thalia worked beside him without needing instruction. She anticipated his movements, passing tools before he asked, holding plates steady, patching joints when his hands were too full. Her precision made his chaos stronger. When he cursed, she smirked. When he bled, she pressed a rag into his hand without comment. Elra was a whirlwind, darting between piles of junk, scavenging like a fox in a henhouse. She wired processors with reckless genius, her small hands moving faster than Ben's scarred fingers could keep up with. Twice, she set off sparks that should have fried her eyebrows. Twice, she came back laughing. This isn't building a ship, Ben muttered at one point, sweat dripping into his beard. It's building a family of lunatics. Better than building alone, Thalia shot back. He glanced at her, caught off guard. She wasn't looking at him. Her silver eyes were fixed on the half-formed hull before them, but her hand brushed against his arm briefly, deliberately. Heat lingered there longer than it should have. Across the square, Gregor's ship loomed like a predator. Sleek lines, reinforced bow, a gleam of polished steel where Ben's frame was still bare bones. The crowd roared every time a new section slotted into place. Wagers tipped heavily in Gregor's favor. Ben didn't look. He couldn't afford to. Instead, he trusted the chaos. Ugly welds mismatched engines, processors that hummed dangerously. It was a patchwork monster, but it was theirs. Night fell, Junk City's artificial dome dimming to simulate stars. Floodlights threw harsh shadows across the square. Still they worked, still they built. At one point, Elra crawled out from under the nav console, grease smeared across her face like war paint. Processors synced, she reported proudly. But the primary bus is running hot. About 18% failure chance. Better than 50, Ben grunted. She grinned, collapsing on the deck beside him. You're fun. Fun, he barked a laugh. Kid, I'm half dead and my back feels like scrap metal. You're still fun. Thalia appeared with a ration bar, pressing it into his hand. Eat. He grimaced at the taste, recycled protein and salt, but chewed anyway. She leaned against the half-built hull, close enough that he could smell her again. Machine oil mixed with something floral, faint but unmistakable. You ever wonder, she said quietly, why Hardin brought us here? Why Junk City? Ben wiped his mouth, frowning. Because it's a cesspit where desperate people come to vanish. Her smile was bitter. Exactly. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The crowd roared in the distance, Gregor's augmented arm throwing sparks like fireworks. But in their small corner of chaos, something else sparked. Not steel, not fire, something more dangerous. Ben cleared his throat, shoving the empty ration wrapper into his pocket. Back to work. Hours bled into each other. The hull took shape, engines slotted into place with screams of protest. Wires hissed, processors hummed, and slowly, painfully, a ship began to emerge from the mountain of junk. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't beautiful, but it was alive. And as dawn painted the dome with artificial light, Ben caught Thalia's eye across the framework. She was smeared with grease sweat running down her temple, her hair sticking in pink strands to her purple skin. But she was smiling, a real smile. Elra, perched on the half-built hull, shouted, "She's ugly as hell." Ben grinned back, exhaustion heavy in his bones. Ugly works. The crowd roared again, this time for them. For the first time, Ben realized they weren't just building a ship. They were building a family, one plate, one wire, one stubborn weld at a time. And Junk City was watching. The crowd had been chanting Gregor's name for hours, every weld from his augmented arm sparking applause. His ship already looked like something out of a recruitment hollow, sleek lines, reinforced bow engines humming with a cruel elegance. In comparison, Ben's project looked like a scrapyard accident on stilts. But it was holding together. Barely. And then the lights flickered. At first, people thought it was just another power drain, common in Junk City, where every circuit was stolen, spliced, and overtaxed. But when the second flicker came longer, darker, the roar of the crowd wavered. Conversations cut short. Somewhere a baby cried. Ben's hands froze on the spanner. He knew that silence. It wasn't mechanical failure. It was fear. "Mom?" Elra's voice was small. She crouched on the half-finished hull-pink hair, glowing faintly under the dying floodlights. "What's happening?" Thalia straightened, silver eyes narrowing toward the horizon beyond the dome. "Stories," she murmured. "Ghost stories." And then the sky tore open. Drones spilled through the atmosphere dome like locusts, hundreds of them, each a perfect black sphere, bristling with articulated limbs. They moved with insect precision, slicing through the air in flawless formations. Their voices weren't screams or roars, but the cold hum of synchronized engines. The crowd went from nervous to panicked in an instant. People shoved, screamed, trampled each other in their desperation to escape the square. Bets and credits were forgotten. Survival was the only currency now. Ben dropped the spanner, heart thundering. Collectors. The word scraped his throat like sandpaper. He'd heard the rumors of machines that harvested tech and talent, scooping up anything of value and leaving only stripped husks behind. Nobody ever saw them twice. No survivors, no mercy. Gregor's wrenchmen snapped into formation instantly, their discipline startling after hours of posturing. Blast shields unfolded, weapons drawn. Gregor himself didn't flinch, his mechanical arm rotating into a plasma cannon with a whine. He looked up at the descending swarm and snarled, "Keep building." "Are you out of your mind?" Ben shouted across the square. "They're not here for a show." The duel continues, Gregor's amplified voice boomed, drowning the chaos. "First to orbit, still wins." "Heartless bastard," Thalia muttered. She grabbed a rifle from a panicked mercenary, checked the charge, and slid into a firing stance without hesitation. Elra's eyes went wide. "Mom." "Stay with Ben," Thalia barked, her voice the sharp command of a soldier who'd never truly retired. "Keep building. This is what we do. We survive." The first wave of drones hit like a storm. Plasma cutters carved through the outer edges of the crowd, sparks raining down as metal and flesh alike were sliced apart. People screamed, their voices lost beneath the mechanical hum. The drones didn't kill for pleasure. They harvested. Bodies dragged upward, ships gutted mid-air, processors ripped free of consoles. Ben's instincts screamed at him to run. Grab Thalia, grab Elra, and vanish into the Undercity. But the half-built hull loomed before him, wires dangling, engines half-strapped. It was their only chance. "Elra," he shouted, "processors online." She jolted, her hands trembling over the nav console. Yeah, but the cooling's unstable. We'll melt the chips if we push too hard." "Then don't push too hard. Redirect the flow through the secondary line." Her silver eyes flicked at him, fear giving way to determination. "On it." Thalia fired her rifle, humming with deadly precision. A drone exploded midair, showering molten fragments across the square. She shifted position without hesitation, drawing fire away from Ben and Elra. She wasn't just surviving, she was protecting. Ben dove back into the engine mount's plasma torch sparking as he reinforced the coupling. The vibrations told him everything they had minutes before the whole rig collapsed. His music still played, distorted by the chaos back in black, roaring defiantly through the square. "Ugly fix is the right fix," he muttered. "Come on, baby, hold together." Tiny appeared out of nowhere, the little lizard scampering across the deck tail, barely hanging on. "Boss," he squeaked, voice high with panic. "Bad news. Very, very bad news." "No kidding," Ben growled. "What do you want me to do about it?" "Hit the red button," Tiny screeched, pointing one claw toward the workshop panel at the edge of the square. "There's 50 red buttons. Then hit all of them." Alarms screamed as emergency systems activated in chaotic sequence. Fire suppression sprayed foam across half the square. Gravity generators hiccuped, flipping random sections upside down. People and drones alike slammed into the ceiling with bone-breaking crunches. "Good job," Tiny Ben muttered, hauling himself upright as sparks rained down. "Remind me to staple that tail back on later." Thalia slid into cover beside him, her rifle smoking. "We can't hold them off forever." "I know." He pointed at the half-finished hull. "That's why we finish this. Now." Together, they worked. Ben welding Thalia, feeding him parts. Elra rerouting power with frantic genius. The ship roared, groaned, protested, but it lived. Piece by stubborn piece, it lived. A shadow fell across them. Ben looked up and froze. The collector heavy unit descended like a god of metal and fire. Twice the size of the other drones bristling with weapons, its central eye glowed crimson with cold intelligence. Its primary cannon swiveled directly toward their scrap-built ship. "Down," Thalia shouted. The blast carved through the square, vaporizing metal and stone in an instant. Ben tackled Elra, slamming her into cover as the beam scorched past. Heat seared his back, the smell of burning ozone filling his nose. Across the battlefield, Gregor roared. He didn't run, didn't hide. His augmented arm transformed again, tools retracting, weapons unfolding. With a bellow, he charged the heavy unit head-on. Plasma bolts screamed from his cannon, carving furrows into the collector's armor. Drones swarmed him, but he tore through them with brute strength, his wrenchmen rallying around him like knights around a king. "He's insane," Elra whispered. "No," Ben said, softly, eyes locked on the bloodied figure fighting like a demon. "He's Junk City." The heavy unit swung its cannon, lining up on Gregor. Ben's heart seized. Grayson Gregor's voice thundered across the comm, ragged with pain. "Catch!" Something arced through the smoke, a fuel coupling, the one part Ben desperately needed. Gregor had ripped it from the salvage pile with his last good arm. Ben caught it, instincts from a lifetime of fixing broken things kicking in. Their eyes met across the chaos, the Baron of Gears bleeding and broken, and the mechanic who never asked for this fight. Understanding passed between them in that single heartbeat. Then the beam fired. The blast consumed the space where Gregor had stood. No Elra screamed. Smoke billowed. For a terrible moment, Ben thought the Baron had been obliterated. But then movement, Gregor crawling from the wreckage, his mechanical arm gone, blood pouring from the ruin of his shoulder. He still clutched the scorched remains of a drone he'd used as a shield. "Build it," he croaked, his voice echoing across the comms. "Get them out. Protect the city." Ben shoved the coupling into place, sparks blinding him as he welded with every ounce of strength left in his body. Elra's startup sequence. She slammed the console. "Fuel pressure's good. Nav's online stabilizers are iffy, but it might hold." Thalia appeared at his side, blood on her cheek, rifle empty, but eyes blazing. "Trust me," she said, voice steady despite the chaos. Ben met her gaze, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Always." The heavy unit's cannons swiveled back toward them. Ben grabbed the controls, teeth bared. "Strap in. This is going to be rough." The ship roared to life, engines screaming as the makeshift frames shuddered. Plasma fire lit the square, the collector aiming to erase them in a single shot. But the ugly ship leapt skyward anyway, defiant, burning alive. And Junk City roared with it. The ship screamed as it clawed its way into the sky. Every weld, every bolt, every mismatched plate rattled with the force of liftoff. Ben's hands clenched the jury-rigged controls and knuckles white beneath the grime. The ugly vessel shuddered like it wanted to rip itself apart, but it held. Barely. Below them, Junk City burned. Collector drones poured through the streets, tearing into workshops, dragging away screaming civilians. Fires roared across the dome's horizon, casting the entire scrapyard metropolis in shades of red and black. The heavy unit rose after them, cannon glowing with malevolent light, a predator hunting its wounded prey. Elra clung to the nav console, her eyes wide but steady. Her fingers danced over the cracked interface, rerouting power and compensating for stabilizers that had no business functioning. "Portside's going critical," she shouted over the noise. I know Ben snapped, sweat stinging his eyes. He slammed a lever forward, coaxing more thrust from the dying engines. Thalia, already on it. She moved like she'd been born in a cockpit, hands flying across the secondary console. Energy surged as she rerouted power through half-dead conduits, sparks showering her arms. I've cut the port array stabilizers rebalancing. The ship lurched the deck, tilting hard enough to slam Ben into the side panel. Pain flared across his ribs, but the hull steadied. They were still alive. "For now," he muttered. The heavy unit fired. The blast seared past their tail, close enough to rattle the hull. Alarm screamed. One of the aft plates tore loose, tumbling into the sky in a trail of fire. "Too close," Elra yelled. "Welcome to my life," Ben gritted out. He yanked the control yoke, diving them into the graveyard of derelicts, orbiting just above Junk City's dome. Massive husks of capital ships floated like silent tombstones, stripped for parts, but still dangerous. "Ever play Thread the Needle at 300 meters per second?" Ben asked. Thalia shot him a sideways look, sweat streaking her temple. "No." "Good. You won't have time to be scared." He dove the ship between two rusting battleships, plasma fire chasing their tail. The hull screamed as it scraped metal sparks, streaking like comets into the void. Elra whooped, her fear burning into exhilaration. "You're insane," Thalia shouted. Probably, Ben said, teeth bared. "But it's working." The heavy unit pursued its bulk, smashing through derelicts, drones swarming ahead of it like wasps. Ben twisted, rolled, forced the ship through gaps too narrow, turns too sharp. Every motion was agony to the vessel, but it held. Ugly fixes, ugly miracles. "Nav systems overheating," Elra warned. "Gyros are maxed." "Kid, I need a miracle," Ben barked. Her hands blurred, reprogramming on the fly. Already working on it. The heavy fired again. The blast clipped a derelict, detonating the remains in a blinding fireball. Shrapnel tore across their hull. A jagged piece of metal slammed through the viewport, narrowly missing Ben's shoulder before embedding in the console. Elra screamed but kept working. Thalia yanked the shard free, tossing it aside. "We can't keep this up." Ben's throat was raw. His muscles burned. Every instinct screamed to bail, to abandon ship, to let the ugly thing die. But when he looked at the two women beside him, their silver eyes blazing with trust, defiance, and sheer will, he knew quitting wasn't an option. "One more push," he growled. "Just one more." Thalia's hands flew over the console, her movements too precise, too instinctive. For a second, Ben forgot the chaos around them, forgot the fire and death. He saw only her purple skin, streaked with grease, pink hair plastered to her forehead, silver eyes focused with deadly calm. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, suddenly, the question torn from somewhere deep inside. "Because you're not like him," she snapped back, never pausing. Hardened, her jaw tightened. "Because you don't see us as property. You see us as—" She cut herself off, biting her lip. "As what?" Ben pressed. "As people." Her voice dropped softer, rawer. "As family." The word hit harder than any plasma blast. The heavy unit fired again. The beam grazed the starboard side, scorching the hull. Systems flared red across the console. Elra cursed. "We lost secondary stabilizers. We're spinning." The ship rolled violently. Ben's stomach lurched, stars whirling outside the viewport. He fought the yoke, teeth grinding. "Thalia, anything." She hesitated, just for a second. Then she said it. "I'm pregnant." The words sliced through the chaos, sharp and undeniable. Ben froze. His hands slackened on the controls for a fraction of a heartbeat, enough to send the ship into a deeper spin. "What?" "Not Hardens." Her voice was steady, silver eyes meeting his in the storm. "From before, I was leaving him anyway." "The pirates stopped me, and then you—" The deck shuddered violently, jerking them back into the moment. I chose this path, Ben. She reached out her hand, finding his wrist, steadying it on the yoke. Because you're the first man in years who looked at me and saw more than a trophy. You saw me. Elra's voice cracked, half panic, half disbelief. Mom, seriously now. Beautiful moment, kid, Ben growled, muscles straining as he fought the spin. Save it for after we don't die. Thalia didn't flinch. She pressed her hand harder against his, anchoring him. Survive first, she said, but you needed to know. Ben swallowed hard, throat dry. His vision blurred not from the spin, but from the weight of the words. A child, a future, not a job, not a payment, something real. The ship lurched, stabilizers screeching. Elra's hands flew. Got it? Redirected gyro control through the nav system. The spin steadied. The ugly vessel straightened, stars settling into place. Ben's grip tightened, his focus snapping back. Good work, kid. The heavy unit loomed behind them, charging its cannon again. Thalia, Ben rasped. I know. Her fingers danced, rerouting power, one last burst. Kid. Elra's grin was wild. Already hacked the failsafes. She'll give us everything she's got. Ben's lips curled into a feral smile. Then let's show them how ugly wins. He slammed the throttle. The engine screamed, overclocked beyond reason. The hull rattled welds, straining alarms blaring. The heavy fired, but the burst of speed carried them clear, the beam slicing harmlessly past. They punched through the graveyard, bursting into open space. Stars spilled across the black, brilliant, and endless. Behind them, the heavy unit shrieked its mechanical fury, but it didn't follow. The collector swarm was retreating, pulled back by some command only they could hear. For the first time, silence. Elra let out a ragged laugh. We made it. We actually... Ben slumped back, muscles trembling, every nerve burning. He couldn't think, couldn't process. Except for one thing. He turned his head, meeting Thalia's silver eyes. She was exhausted, smeared with grease and blood, but her gaze burned steady. I'm not proper, she said quietly. No, Ben said. His voice was hoarse but certain. Your family. She smiled, then soft and real, her hand still on his. And for the first time since Junk City, Ben Grayson thought maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. The ugly ship limped back toward Junk City, her patched hull scorched black. Her engines whining like wounded animals. She had no right to still be flying, but somehow against all odds she did. Ben sat slumped in the pilot's chair, arms trembling from exhaustion, hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Beside him, Thalia adjusted the console with calm precision, her silver eyes steady. Elra leaned forward in the co-pilot's seat, face pressed to the viewport, grinning like she'd just ridden the galaxy's wildest roller coaster. Below them, Junk City smoldered. Fires burned across the dome, plumes of smoke rising where whole districts had been gutted by collector drones. But the city still stood, scarred, battered, half destroyed, but alive. The comm crackled. Static gave way to a voice so weak it barely carried. Grayson, you magnificent bastard. Ben jerked upright. Gregor. The Baron of Gears chuckled, the sound ragged and wet. Looks like you made orbit first. Ben's chest tightened. He could picture the man, half his body wrecked, his mechanical arm gone, blood pouring from wounds that would kill lesser men. And yet Gregor still found room for sarcasm. You should be dead, Ben muttered. Been hearing that for years. Another cough, wet and rattling. Listen to me. The duel's done. You win. The city's yours. Ben froze. I don't want your throne. Not giving you my throne, idiot. Gregor's voice was fading but still carried steel. Giving you responsibility. Junk City needs someone who gives a damn. Do better than I did. The line went silent. For a long moment, Ben stared at the console, the weight of Gregor's words pressing down on him, heavier than any tool he'd ever carried. He'd come here to fix an engine. Now he was being told to fix a city. Behind him, Elra said softly, he trusts you. Ben snorted. That makes one of us. They touched down in the public square, the landing struts groaning dangerously. Crowds had gathered despite the chaos, battered citizens drawn by the sight of the duel's survivors. When the ramp hissed open, silence fell. Every eye turned to the mechanic, the alien wife, the prodigy daughter. Someone started clapping, then another, and another, until the square thundered with applause. Ben blinked, stunned. They're cheering. Thalia's lips curved faintly. They're cheering us. He shook his head, bewildered. For what? I didn't win them a war. I didn't save their homes. All I did was stop one monster from eating the city whole. Sometimes Thalia said softly, that's enough. Gregor's surviving wrenchmen approached. At their head was a scarred woman, her mechanical eye glowing faintly. She bowed her head with surprising respect. Baron's in medical, lost the arm, but he'll live. He said to tell you the workshop district is yours now. Also, her lip curled, we've got Captain Hardin Marin in custody. He's demanding his family back. Ben's jaw tightened. He glanced at Thalia, then Elra. Both looked at him, waiting. Tell him, Ben said finally, his voice low and steady. They're unavailable. Permanently. The wrenchwoman's smile was sharp as a blade. With pleasure. The applause swelled again as Ben and the Marins walked through the broken streets. Citizens nodded, bowed, even offered supplies. Junk City had always been a cesspool, but tonight it felt like something else. Hope. Tiny scampered at their heels, tail reattached with what looked suspiciously like duct tape. Boss, he squeaked, voice shrill with panic. Bad news, very, very bad news. Ben groaned. What now? The collectors left something behind. Tiny pointed at a hovering drone fragment clutched in his claws. Message pod. Looks important. Of course they had, because one nightmare was never enough. Tomorrow's problem, Ben muttered, rubbing his temples. Thalia arched an eyebrow. You sound remarkably calm for someone holding the city's next disaster in his lap. Ben shrugged. Calm, lady, I'm dead on my feet. But right now we're alive. That's all I care about. They reached what was left of Ben's workshop, or what had once been his workshop. The building was rubble slagged by collector fire, only a twisted skeleton of beams left standing. For a long moment, Ben stared at it, something hollow opening in his chest. His tools, his projects, his whole life. Gone. Then Elra tugged on his sleeve. We'll build a new one, better, with proper defenses, and a kitchen that doesn't smell like coolant. Thalia's voice was quiet but firm. Our place. Ben looked at them, mother-daughter, both smeared with soot and grease, both looking at him like he was the center of their world. Not payment, not property, family. Our place, he echoed. The words felt strange on his tongue, but right, like a gear clicking into place. Thalia's hand slid into his. Strong, steady, real. Elra grinned, pink hair whipping in the breeze. One condition. Mom handles the business side. Your filing system is criminal. Ben barked a laugh, the sound startling in its rawness. Deal. As they walked, citizens fell in step with them, offering scraps of food-water tools. The city wasn't saved. Not yet. But it was alive. And maybe, just maybe, it could be fixed. Ben! Thalia's voice was low, meant only for him. Yeah, thank you for not just handing us over. He swallowed, uncomfortable. Mechanic's code. You don't return what's freely given. That's not the code, she said gently. And you know it. He didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, he squeezed her hand. Later, as the night deepened and Junk City smoldered, Ben sat on the ramp of the ugly ship. He was bone-tired, grease-ground into his skin, blood still drying in his beard. But he was alive, and for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. Thalia leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Elra sprawled nearby, tinkering with a busted drone she'd scavenged, humming to herself. Tiny was stuck halfway in a fuel conduit, shrieking for help. Ben chuckled, shaking his head. Some things never change. Thalia lifted her head, her silver eyes soft. What's funny? Just thinking. He gazed out over the ruined city. Started this week fixing one ship, ending it fixing a whole damn city, and gaining a family. The pregnant kind, Thalia added, smirking faintly. His throat tightened, but he managed a grin. Guess I've got a lot of fixing to do. The applause of Junk City still echoed in the distance, mingling with the crackle of fires and the hum of broken machines. It wasn't much. It wasn't perfect. But it was theirs. And for Ben Grayson, mechanic fixer, reluctant hero, it was enough. For now.